Welcome back to another episode of Susan LoPresti Wellness, Mind, Body, and Soul. This is the podcast where we explore the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to a woman's life, her health, and all aspects of navigating the midlife landscape. I'm your host, Susan LoPresti, and I have a very special guest with me here today. Her name is Amanda Wiggins, and Amanda holds a PhD in neuroscience, and she has spent her career bridging the gap between science and business. At the CGP lab, they're developing innovative solutions for neurological conditions, metabolic health, and healthy aging, which is what my podcast is all about. It's built on decades of research. Their flagship product, which is called CGP Max, has helped customers in over 60 countries with incredible feedback from families that are dealing with neurological conditions and those seeking to support their brain health as they age. It's exciting work, and I know that my listeners are really going to find the science and the stories behind what she's talking about extremely fascinating. Beyond that, she's had the privilege of launching and scaling brands internationally, serving on industry boards, and driving strategy that turns cutting edge research into real world impact. And without further ado, Amanda, welcome to my podcast. I'm so honored that you decided to join me here today, and I'm so excited for our talk.
Hey, Susan, thanks so much for having me. It's
You're
great to be
welcome.
here. Yeah, so I'm the CEO of a company here in New Zealand called the CGP Lab, and we were formed in 2020. We've been super busy commercializing a dipeptide molecule called cyclic glycine proline, or CGP for short. And what makes it special is it helps rebuild the vasculature in your body, but particularly in your brain. And this is very, very interesting because it's now known that small changes in your brain's blood vessels, particularly the really tiny ones, which are called capillaries, has a massive impact later in life. And actually, I joined the company a year and a half ago now, and the reason I was so interested in this is because of a family connection to dementia. I've actually had an aunt who very sadly passed away of dementia 2.5 years ago now, and my stepfather also is suffering from this terrible condition. So that's really spurred me on to do a deep dive in the last couple of years into looking at ways we can protect our brain from developing dementia later. And what's exciting is there's actually a lot you can do. And there is an amazing publication that was put out last year, 2024, by the Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention, Care and Treatment. So the Lancet Commission is a group of the world's top neuroscientists, specialist doctors, and carers who come together every 4 years to research and bring together all of the latest thinking and research on dementia, all aspects of it. And so it's a very, very powerful data set. It goes beyond just a single study. It pulls together, it's like a mega sort of meta-analysis, and they only go with the strongest data. So what they found was that there's all these changes throughout the life course one can make, and if you were to address these 14 modifiable risk factors throughout your life, you could reduce your risk of developing dementia by a staggering 45%.
Wow. Wow, that's
Mm.
incredible because in my family, on my dad's side, I had three of his sisters, my aunts, that had dementia. And on
Mm.
my mom's side, she had one sister who also had dementia, and I tested positive for the gene. And I
Oh,
was told that that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get dementia, but you are susceptible to it. And so, brain health is one of the biggest passions that I have as far as maintaining, and I'm always looking for new ways to help to improve brain health. I talk a lot about it on my podcast, so I want to get all of your information, those 14 points that you said. So feel free to dive in because I'm listening, and I'm sure my listeners are also paying attention. Do you feel that women, or is it a fact that women get dementia more than men do?
Women are at a slightly elevated risk compared to men. Yes, yes. Susan, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of family history there. And
Yes.
to have the gene as well, which is absolutely not a given that dementia will develop. It is a risk factor. So, I mean, I think to me, reading everything that's happening in the world of dementia and Alzheimer's research, we've never been at a better time really to stem the flow. And gosh, it was the most interesting study out just a couple of weeks ago, actually, that showed that the younger generations are becoming less susceptible or less likely to develop dementia later. So the
Oh,
risk is actually lowering with each generation. And they don't exactly know why, but the leading thinking there is that it's all around women's access to education.
okay.
So, yeah, yeah, interesting, isn't it? So, education is a known protective factor for developing dementia later. And actually, that's a really nice segue into the Lancet Commission study. So, they showed that having more early childhood education lowers the risk of developing dementia by 5% later in life. Isn't that interesting?
Yes,
So,
it is.
yeah, yeah, it really speaks to the use it or lose it aspect of the brain. You know, we know that we need to use our muscles and our body to prevent muscle wastage, but
Yeah.
it's a similar situation with the brain. You know, our brain is made up of billions and billions of neurons all interconnected and talking to each other constantly. If we don't use those connections, they do atrophy and die. And so the more we can use our brain cells, and particularly, you know, the connections are what are our memories, the more we can use that and learn, the stronger our brain will be later in life. And it obviously doesn't even have to be formal education, just staying mentally active and doing stuff with your brain.
Give me some
So that
examples of that, just for a woman who's 45 and older. What could they do as far as stimulating their brain?
mm, well, from what I have read on this topic, the best thing you can do in terms of a mentally stimulating activity is something you wouldn't normally do. So it's not necessarily a one size fits all. So, for example, in our family, my sister and my mum and I, every morning we do two word puzzles, Chordal and Wordle.
Wow.
Wordle, I think, was bought by the New York Times actually, and we share those results. And that's great. It's a little bit of morning brain stimulation, but because we do it every day, it perhaps isn't the best for extending your thinking. So it's really doing, you know, doing something that you wouldn't normally do. So perhaps that is, yeah, a puzzle if you wouldn't normally do it. Could you join a music group and learn an instrument, or start with Lingo to learn a new language?
Right.
Anything that basically it's very similar to going to the gym. You could go to the gym and do the same thing every day. You're not going to prevent muscle loss and you're not going to build strength. It's a similar for the brain. The brain loves being pushed a bit, you know, stepping outside your normal daily. And so, something I quite like to do actually, and this is a good one for middle aged women, I think,
Okay.
go around the supermarket backwards. So, you know,
Oh,
you supermarket shopping is something you do several times a week, right? It's so
yes.
routine. And you normally take exactly the same route down the aisles. You know where your cereal is, you know where your coffee is. And so here's my challenge to you: go around the other way. Get your trolley and start where you would normally end. And wow, that is quite challenging for your brain. It's like, oh, where are the nuts again? Oh gosh, oh that's right, aisle 3. I need to go this way. So just small things like that. Take a different route to work in your car, park somewhere different. And even if you're sitting down to watch a show in the evening, sit somewhere different that you don't normally sit.
As simple
That will,
as that.
yeah. Yeah, it
Wow.
just gets your neurons firing. We get too
Yeah.
comfortable, yeah, I think, in our lives.
So what about exercise? Because I hear that that is also very important as far as brain health goes. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah, so in this Lancet study, they kind of broke down the modifiable risk factors into early life, kind of midlife, and later in life. And so in the middle part of life, physical inactivity is one of the identified risk factors, and that contributes a 2% risk to developing dementia, which I find quite interesting. I thought it would be more than that, actually.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of good research around how exercise is hugely beneficial for the brain. And we now know that even a short walk, like a 15-minute vigorous walk, spurs on activity in the memory centers of the brain. So it's just getting that blood pumping, and there's a lot of thinking around that it's about keeping your blood vessels healthy.
Yes.
So, for busy working mums out there like me, it's very, very easy for me to find excuses not to exercise.
Of
Like, well,
course.
yeah. So I have lodged in my brain, there is no excuse, 15
Fif-
minutes.
yeah, 15 minutes. You can't really argue a good argument. Oh, I can't find 15 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And where I live here in New Zealand is on a hill. So, any which
Oh,
way I walk is cardio for me. So I do that. I try to do that every single day. And I think most people could find the time to do that every single day.
yeah.
But what I've read, that even doing housework counts as
Oh, that's
exercise.
good.
It's physical activity, which is way better than inactivity. So yeah, physical inactivity contributes around 2% of a person's dementia risk later in life.
And
Some of
what
the other
about I'm sorry. And I
no,
was
go
going
ahead.
to ask, what about socialization and connection versus being isolated home all day by yourself? Or the other side of that coin would be to have a group of, friends that you do things with. I hear that also helps with brain health, being connected, having community. Do you agree with
Absolutely.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, and this is one of the more recently identified risk factors. It wasn't really known, 5, 6 years ago. Social isolation wasn't really identified as a risk factor, but it is now. And the Lancet Commission put a 5% risk attribution to social isolation. And, it's quite a big deal. I think, social isolation has a bit of stigma attached to it. I feel it's just my personal feeling. It doesn't need to have stigma attached to it. There's lots people can do to be connected in their community. Join a group, for example, any group. It doesn't even matter which one. Ideally, one that does a bit of exercise, but not necessarily.
Right.
Yeah, and I think also just the message to people of my age who maybe have more elderly parents is keep an eye out for them. Make sure they are getting out. Take them out. Make sure they're out there, even going out for a coffee and having a chat to the waitress, and it all counts as social connectedness.
Yes.
We're human to human interaction is very, very rich in terms of inputs to your brain.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on in body language, facial expressions, tone of voice that our brain is trying to interpret, right? It's hard work, actually. Connecting with other humans is is something that AI can't do. Only our brains can do that right now.
Yes.
We're interpreting this rich, rich data that's coming in, and it comes back to that kind of use it or lose it
Yes.
aspect. So our brains get quite busy when we're talking to other humans because we're trying to work out, do they like me? Are they, and it harks back to sort of cave person days. Are they going to attack me? Is this my enemy? Like our brains are trying to, it's rich data. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would encourage people to try to connect. It doesn't need to be a big deal or scary. Just get out and join a group. Could be a reading group, anything that gets you
Yes.
out of the
Book
house.
club
Yeah.
or
Book
playing
club.
bingo or card games, anything like that. Another thing that I recently heard, and when I thought about it, it kind of made sense. And that is like a lot of the elderly, they start losing their hearing. And if
Mm,
they don't get hearing aids, and they're not really, when they're talking to someone, they may not be hearing them fully. And so I heard that that also could lead to dementia, where your brain is just not as active, and you're making believe, like a lot of them will make believe like they're hearing exactly what someone is saying, but really they can't hear them too well. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that Susan, it sounds like you've probably read all the same stuff I have. That
I'm
so
doing my
that was
research, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. So that hearing loss was one of the newly identified risk factors in that most recent Lancet Commission, and they attributed quite a large risk to hearing loss. So 7% increased risk of developing dementia later with hearing loss.
Yeah.
That's a really big deal, right? And yeah, it's for the reasons you mentioned. So less input to the brain. But also, when people have hearing loss, they tend to start to avoid social situations
Yes.
because it's difficult to hear and they feel a bit embarrassed. They can't quite hear what people are saying. So it's like a double whammy. It's a compounding problem of then people becoming more withdrawn from those lovely social connections, which we know spur on brain connections. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. And also vision loss. Oh, sorry, with hearing loss, that risk starts middle of life, not necessarily just later, but in the middle of life. And in fact, the vast majority of the risk factors are middle life changes that people could make as opposed to, late life changes. So the thinking there is that, the damage that's occurring in the brain, particularly around the vasculature, becoming leaky and ineffective, is actually kicking off in about that middle life.
Mhm.
And the changes that happen accumulate over time. And there's been some really interesting in silico modeling done where they showed that around age 70 to 75 is the tipping point for the brain's vasculature, and we know that's when there's a serious step increase in a person's risk of any serious neurological conditions like stroke, dementia, Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that middle life and controlling blood pressure, quitting smoking if you smoke, reducing your alcohol intake, sleep. Sleep wasn't actually
Yes.
identified in the Lancet Commission, which I find interesting. It doesn't mean it's not an important risk factor. It just means there wasn't enough high quality evidence to include it in this big wig study.
Yeah.
But we know that you need a good amount of sleep to clear out basically the start of the build-up of toxins in the brain each
Yeah.
night.
The
And that's a bit
glymphatic
scary, right?
system, right? The
Yeah,
glymphatic
yeah,
system.
that's
Yes.
it.
The
It's a bit
cleansing.
scary, right? Because you don't necessarily have a good night's sleep every night. And when you're a busy person, you've got to get up and soldier on.
Yeah.
I'm no expert in sleep. If anyone has the actual answer on how to make yourself have a good night's sleep, let me know. But there are a few things I do try to do. So I do try to take specific actions to switch my brain from my day into my night. So just the simple act for me of doing like a skincare routine at night before I go to bed, I've it's like I've trained my brain to know this is the final step. Calm your brain down. I also read before I go to sleep, and
Yeah.
that's very effective for switching from all the machinations of the day into just
Turn off your
fantasy.
electronics, right? Your laptop, your telephone, your cell phone. Get away from all of that. Dimming the
Mm,
lights in your house.
mm,
I also think that, well, for me, because I used to have trouble going to sleep, but I don't any longer. Let me knock on wood. But
right.
a nice Epsom salt bath in the evening,
Mm,
it's great. A cup of sleepy time tea, some kind of chamomile
mm,
tea. Also, I think your bedroom should be conducive to sleep. So you shouldn't have your laptop in there. You shouldn't have your bills piled up on you. It should be conducive to sleeping. Dark curtains, so you're shutting out well, I live in New York City, so you shut out all the noise that's outside. And it really does help. Even the bedclothes that you wear, natural fiber clothing,
mm.
also helps so that you're not sweating or uncomfortable. So there is a whole routine that you can do to help improve sleep. I talk about that a lot on my podcast also. Amanda,
Mm.
I wanted to touch on nutrition for a bit
Mm.
with brain health.
Yeah, so interestingly, in that Dementia Lancet Commission report, they actually didn't go into nutrition, which I find quite interesting. But
Yeah.
again, it doesn't mean that there isn't, that obviously nutrition is very important, but I guess there aren't enough studies on any particular one type of nutritional intervention to make it into the Lancet Commission. That's all that means. Really, really interesting nutrition wise. So the mind diet is largely heralded as the most effective for brain health.
Yeah.
So it's essentially the Mediterranean diet with more fish. That's how I like to think of it. The hallmarks of it are very, very similar to the Mediterranean diet. So high in vegetables, fruit, and legumes, low in red meat, and obviously virtually no ultra processed food.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
So now tell us what it is that you're involved in your company. What is that all about?
Yeah, so our company is all about CGP, which is a peptide molecule, and the G is glycine, which is an amino acid, and P is proline, amino acid. And we have developed a manufacturing process that brings these two amino acids together under heat, which cyclizes them. And it's this cyclized peptide molecule that is very, very active in the brain. So the company was formed off about 30 years of research of our chief scientist before she joined the company.
Mhm.
We showed what CGP does, and it's very, very active in neuronal repair. And the mechanism of action is really, really interesting. So it works by regulating a hormone called IGF-1. And in doing so, it repairs capillaries and arteries and veins. It sort of acts a bit like a master builder to make sure that the lining of your blood vessels forms correctly and isn't leaky. So one of the things that happens with as we age is that our capillaries, which is the tiny ones,
Yeah.
become leaky and disordered. And when they're leaky, they're not doing their job properly. So the job of capillaries, so if we go back a step, arteries are what take blood away from the heart and distribute it around the body. So oxygen, and then veins take the cellular trash, the waste back to be disposed of. And in between arteries and veins is capillaries, and capillaries sit around all our organs. And that's where the real exchange happens, the delivery of the oxygen nutrients and the actual taking out of the cellular waste. So that process is important in the brain, but it's important for all of our organs. And
Mhm.
IGF-1 and CGP are very, very important for regulating that process of repairing and growing capillaries. So
Wow.
there's lots of implications of that, which I'd be happy to talk about.
Yes, please. So is it in a pill form that you take it or?
Yeah. So we've developed a dietary supplement brand called CGP Max, and that's been on the market for 2.5 years now. That's going really well. And we've got quite a few customers in the US actually, which is
Oh,
nice to see.
yeah.
I love seeing all the countries we ship to. We're shipping to 64 countries, I think it is at the moment, which is just great. I love how connected the world is,
Yes,
despite trade tariffs. We won't go there.
No, that's a topic for a different podcast.
Yeah. So our products are generally used by people around 45 and older to
Okay.
support healthy aging. What we know about CGP is that people who have high levels of CGP in their body at middle age have better cognition later in life. So that's a study that our
Oh,
chief scientist did. So CGP actually exists in all of our bodies. It's part of the cellular or metabolic breakdown of IGF-1. And what happens the older we get is that our IGF-1 becomes more and more dysfunctional, and
mhm.
that really affects the way capillaries function in the body and particularly in the brain. And we also know that people who have serious neurological challenges like Parkinson's disease and stroke, who have higher CGP levels, have much better preserved cognition. Yeah, so it was really this background research that led to the formation of the company. When before the company was the CGP lab, it was a company all around New Zealand, black currants, which are another excellent product, and they'd done a clinical study on people with Parkinson's disease where they'd given them black currant capsules in a clinical study, and they gave them the capsules for 1 month. They had the founders of the company had a really serendipitous meeting with the world expert on CGP, whose name is Dr. Jian Guan. She's now our chief scientist. And they managed to convince her to test the blood samples of these Parkinson's patients for CGP. And they weren't expecting the result they got, which was that there was an elevated CGP in their blood. So it was that discovery that really led to the formation of the company, the discovery of CGP in New Zealand black currants. So that's the
Wow,
backstory. Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah. And so we've been busy more recently, conducted a clinical study in people who have type 2 diabetes and vascular complications thereof. So, there's lots of complications that happen with diabetes, and a lot of them linked to changes in the vasculature. So,
Yeah.
what happens is these big glycation end products, they're called. So the sugar, too much sugar in your bloodstream damages blood vessels, and they start to grow in a very disordered way. They grow too fast, the tiny blood vessels. And it's kind of like building a house too fast without a master plan. They
Yeah.
get very leaky and they don't function very well. And the consequences of that can be quite dire. So people develop things such as peripheral neuropathy. So that's when the nerves in the feet die. It can affect the kidneys, which is called nephropathy, and also the eyes, which is called retinopathy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we did a clinical study in people with type 2 diabetes who also had peripheral neuropathy. So problems with the sensation in their feet. And what we found was that them taking CGP daily for 3 months resulted in a significant restoration of their foot sensation. So we're pretty excited by that because
This,
there's actually nothing on the market for peripheral neuropathy. There's pain medication, but nothing that actually restores the blood flow.
right. Wow, this is a big deal.
Mm,
This is
yeah,
life
we're pretty excited.
changing. Yes. So
So
you don't need a prescription for this, right? Anyone could buy it. Where do you sell it in the States?
we supply into the States from our e-commerce store, so just our website,
Ah,
cgpmax.com. So we're just shipping from New Zealand at the moment.
okay.
Yeah, and as I said, we've got customers in 64 countries, including some really far-flung ones that some of us actually hadn't heard of before. So yeah, there's another really interesting connection with CGP. There's a FDA approved medicine on the market that's a synthetic analog of CGP. It's
Mm-hmm.
called trofinetide. And what's interesting about that is it was actually developed here in New Zealand at the University of Auckland, which our chief scientist was part of that team. And then it was spun out to a company called Neuroscience Pharma, which is based in Australia. And as far as I know, that's the first ever FDA approved drug that's ever come out of a New Zealand university. That's quite a big deal for us down here. That's the holy grail, isn't it? Getting
Yeah.
FDA approval. Excuse
Yes.
me.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful.
And that drug is for people who have a rare genetic condition called Rett syndrome, which is something completely different to all the diseases of aging we've been talking about. So Rett syndrome is a very specific genetic mutation, predominantly affects girls, and it's something that becomes apparent during the early development of the child around age about 18 months to 2 years. They start to significantly regress in their developmental milestones, essentially, and there's no cure. But there is this one, FDA approved drug, which is a synthetic analog of CGP. So yeah, it's and the reason that CGP is effective for they might seem like quite distinct or different things, healthy brain aging, cognition, Rett syndrome, complications of diabetes, but it's the mechanism. So it's that regulating the hormone IGF-1, and IGF-1's involved with lots of different things.
Mm-hmm.
The angle we're most interested in is that kind of brain health angle.
Yes.
Yeah. So
So if someone is on prescription meds for, another condition, is it safe to take this as well?
Yeah, yeah. So in the diabetes study that we did, the patients were on lots of different meds. Some of them were on insulin, most of them were on metformin, many of them were on blood pressure meds, and we found there was no interaction. There were no adverse events recorded.
Hmm.
So far from what we know, there seems to be no supplement drug interactions to be concerned
Oh,
about. The blood pressure
beautiful.
one is really interesting. So, a lot of people who have diabetes will have high blood pressure too.
Yes.
And what we found in our study was that only some people had their blood pressure controlled by their medication. Other people were taking medication, but they still had high blood pressure. So when we looked at our results, we were a little bit confused initially, but what we ended up doing was segmenting those patients into controlled and uncontrolled. And what we found was that those ones who had controlled blood pressure, taking CGP, it did nothing to their blood pressure. Their blood pressure just stayed in the normal range, which is great. You don't want blood pressure going too low.
Right.
And those people who had elevated blood pressure that was not able to be controlled with their meds, taking CGP actually lowered their blood pressure into the normal range.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I guess we don't know the exact mechanism, but we think it's all around that blood vessel health again. It's like that master builder, making sure the integrity of the blood vessels is tight and they're not leaky and they're growing in an ordered fashion so they can do their job.
Wow, I love that. So you have to give me the link where we could find this. So I'll put it in the show notes. You could email it to me and I'll put it in the show notes. Any final thoughts that you want to leave us with, Amanda?
Oh, look, I think my main message that I really want to get out is there's a lot we can do to protect our own brains later in life, and so that we can have the type of retirement that we all want to have, right? Where we're active
Yes,
and connected and doing interesting, cool, adventurous stuff. Or at least that's the retirement I would like to have.
me
And I
too.
think, the world is really awash with quite a lot of messages, right, around health and nutrition. My key message really is, let's just keep an eye on the fundamentals, the getting your daily exercise, focusing on sleep, stop eating crap,
Yes.
eat more vegetables. And we don't need to sweep the tiny details, right? If we just generally get the basics right, we're
Hmm.
just doing so much good stuff for ourselves. So it's not a high tech answer. It's not a particularly sexy soundbite, but it's just get the basics right and you'll be in a much better place. And I know that for myself, I really notice that kind of clarity and energy when I'm doing the basics right. And I
Yeah.
don't need to sweat around whether it should be spinach or kale or broccoli. Just eat some green stuff. It's all good for you.
Yes. Right.
I,
Don't complicate it, right?
yeah,
Simple.
just get the
Yes.
basic, do the basics. Yeah. There's a lot of really interesting emerging research around the effect of eating ultra processed foods. Even 3 days of a high fat, ultra processed diet significantly alters your gut microbiome. So that, there's a lot you can do there on just eating good, wholesome, unprocessed food. So yeah, my I guess my main message is just let's just focus on the basics, and your brain will thank you later.
So for someone who is listening and they're thinking, yeah, I'm a little bit more forgetful. I forget where I left my keys. I'm not that quick on recall with names. I run into someone in the street and I know them, but I can't think of their name right off the bat. And they're just slowing down a little bit. I guess basically what you said about nutrition would be one of the first things that you may offer someone as advice, as well as exercising and connection and how important all of that is, which is very simple to do. There's simple
Very
lifestyle
simple.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't
And
need to overcomplicate, right?
don't need to overcomplicate. Yeah. Just keep it simple. Keep it really simple. Yeah, and with that forgetting where you put your keys, where you parked your car, or for me, where are my glasses? I get
Yeah,
in a few more steps every day just looking for my glasses because I wear two different types. That is really, really normal. Don't
yeah,
worry about it. Do not fret about that. That's quite different to abnormal brain changes. So with normal brain changes, you walk into your bedroom, you see your glasses on the bed where you left them, and you go, "Oh, yeah, that's where I put them." With the start of an abnormal brain change, you see your glasses and you think it's something completely different, like a cat, and you get quite worried and scared, and you can't identify objects. You get confused. There's like a real level of confusion, which is really, really different from just regular forgetfulness, right? So I guess my key message here is if you're just forgetting where you put stuff, do not sweat it. Don't worry about it.
but if you're looking at something and you think that it's something else, that's something to be concerned about. Is that like one of
That's
the first signs of getting dementia or?
It's one of the early signs. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Interestingly, it's coming out now that loss of smell may be one of the earlier signs of dementia.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Um,
new. I haven't heard that.
yeah, yeah, that's an emerging area of research. And they think that, the changes that before the diagnosis of dementia, changes are occurring a good decade, even possibly 2 decades before. So that's a really good reason to just focus on getting the basics right now, right? Don't wait.
Yeah. Wow. Any other supplements or foods? So I know that a healthy oil, like an MCT oil or something like that, is good for your brain because your brain is made up of a lot of fat to begin with. Is that true? I've heard turmeric and different spices like that would also help with brain health.
Mm. Well, the supplements that I take for my brain health, so I am quite obsessive about reading the research on this actually.
Okay.
I take CGP and I only take two other supplements for brain health. So one is fish oil. I take one that's high in particularly in DHA.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good research around, fish oil, omega-3s, particularly DHA for brain health.
Yes.
And B vitamins is the other one.
B.
B vitamins, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So B vitamins are really important for lowering a toxic amino acid in the brain called homocysteine.
Oh,
And we want to lower homocysteine because having elevated homocysteine links to all sorts of negative outcomes, cardiovascular and brain health. So, yeah, my supplement regime for brain health is just those three: CGP, fish oil, and B vitamins.
good advice. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you,
I
Amanda.
feel really sharp, like I've sort of been through a bit of a sort of perimenopause phase where I was a bit foggy for a while there, but I've
Yes.
come out the other side of that and I feel great now. And I'm really trying to just live my own, all the reading I do and research, which is just get the basics right, get to sleep hygiene, get out there, do some walking,
Yes.
exercise, connect. And it's working for me at this point. So
That's
that's good.
beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate this conversation. I learned a lot personally. Like I said, really paying attention to brain health for myself and doing whatever I can, like walking and exercising and social connection and puzzles that I do and things like that. So I appreciate you confirming that what I'm doing is so far so good anyway. So it was my pleasure to have you, and I'd love for you to come on again sometime.
Oh, thank you, Susan. It was really great to chat to you, and it sounds like you're doing all the right things. It's just wonderful. Well done, you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda.